Some of you say you wish you could be in my braid for a day. Well, let me show you what that would really be like as I fumble my way through a new-to-me fun fold card for my son's birthday. All the planning, replanning, decision-making, the fussing, the fiddling, the mind-changing. Actually, I did come up with one very clever idea when I didn't have a tool I needed, so stick around for that. Today's video is an inspiration collaboration with Biddy Penny, a friend I met through Craft Roulette. What is Craft Roulette? Well, I'll link it below if you're interested. As my inspiration, I chose one of the 3 cards in the video Biddy Penny made a couple of years ago with some really neat fun fold cards. So I'll link that below so you can see all 3 of them. I'll also link to her current video where she's using a technique inspired by me. Whenever I'm making something new, whether it's a recipe or a fun fold card with lots of measurements, I make my first one exactly following the instructions. This helps me to learn how it works, and then next time I can try to put my own spin on it. Here's the A2 size secret message card from Biddy Penny's video, just in white cardstock. It looks like a gatefold, but there's a secret surprise inside. It just keeps opening, thanks to a hinge-like mechanism that you build with 2 cuts in the card base. I'm going to make a 4 1/4 inch square version of this card, and I'm starting with a card base that's cut to 8 1/2 by 4 1/4 inches. Normally I would score here in the center, but I want to do some interior decorating before I put the score line down. But I will score the 2 gatefolds now, because that will help define the area in the center for my stenciling. So I scored at 2 1/8 inch, and then I flipped the panel over and I scored at 2 1/8 inch again. To make the score lines actually visible, I put some mint tape along them, and this will also protect the 2 narrow panels on either side of the center. Next, I grabbed one of my newest favorites, the Confetti layering stencil from Syberia Designs. Last time I used it, I used all 5 layers, and while I was making it, I really liked the look of just 1 or 2 layers. It's a little more random, and that will help me out later with the interactive design in this card. Although my panel is somewhat centered on my sticky mat, I put each layer of the stencil so that the corner with the little square alignment hole was in the top left corner of the mat. I blended Rouge ink through the first layer, Sauna through the second, and then Daydream through the third. Next, I folded in those 2 end panels to create the gatefold, and now I want to do some exterior decoration. I put one of the pieces of mint tape inside just to be sure that I don't add any extra ink blending to the inside of the card, and I added some temporary adhesive on top to hold the gatefold panels down, so I could use the same 3 stencil layers and the same 3 colors. My pattern's a little different this time because of where I've placed the card, and now I'm using the bottom left corner to position the stencils, even though that little alignment square hole is still at the top. The temporary adhesive lifted from the mint tape and stuck to the inside of my card, so I just grabbed an adhesive eraser to help get rid of that. Sometimes you do have to be a little patient, but it comes up in pieces that you can just throw in the garbage. I know I'm going to need one more panel with the pattern on it, so I grabbed a 4 1/4 inch square of white cardstock and I did the same thing. 3 colors, 3 layers. The next step is to score the card in the middle. I flipped it over and oops, I see a little mark there, but I am definitely not starting over now. I scored the card base at 4 1/4 inches and I folded it in half. And now for my genius hack. I need to cut lines only in the center portion of the cardstock panel. If you have a trimmer with a blade that you can lift and put down like a Fisker's trimmer, this isn't difficult, but I only have a rolling blade and a little guillotine. So here's what I came up with. I folded the card in half and I put one of the pieces of mint tape along the score line. I want to cut right up to that, but no further. I lined up the card at 1 3/8 inches from the end, and I cut down to where the mint tape started. Then I flipped the card over and I moved the tape to that side, and then I cut it again at 1 3/8 inches. The idea is for this portion of the card to be divided into thirds, but 4 1/4 inches doesn't divide evenly, so I did 1 3/8 and 1 3/8, and that left me with a center portion of 1 4/8 or 1 1/2 inches. You want these cuts to be as straight as possible for good movement, and I used my scissors just to complete the cuts right up to the score lines. Then I just played with it a little bit, making sure that everything bends both ways smoothly. Now to create the hinge mechanism that opens in the center, I need to cut down this panel to just under 2 1/8 inch by 4 1/4 inches. Once you've got your 2 strips, you just weave them into the card. The first one on the left goes under, over, under, and then the right one goes over, under, over. I had to trim the right one a little narrower to make it fit, but you want these pretty snug because they can't be glued in place or the hinge won't work. And now you see why I wanted a random pattern here. I can't imagine what it would take to get a pattern to match up properly, so I think it's better just not to try. Again, I play with it a little, burnishing the folds and opening and closing the card, but you can see that the basic structure is working great. And now it's time to decorate. I love a circle focal point on a square card, and I cut 2 white circles with the idea of layering one over the other and using this Gina K Lots of Dots die to add interest to the top layer. Oops, this circle's too small. No worries, I'll just use the larger one for this, and I'll cut an even larger one for the mat. My son is turning 24, so I'm going to personalize the card with some numbers, and I want to blend ink onto the larger circle as well as onto a strip that I'll cut the numbers from. I got the same 3 colors out and I just blended them roughly onto the cardstock, trying to get good mixes between them. These inks do smooth out as they dry, and the circle panel will mostly be not visible, and the strip will be die cut, so there's no need to be super smooth here. I added some iridescent spray as well as some gold watercolor splatter to add a little shimmer and shine, and I set those aside to dry. Heading back to the card, I noticed when I opened the center, the inks have bled through a little bit, and they don't look very nice. Benny Penny used individual pieces of cardstock to cover these pieces in her example, but honestly, I don't want to measure them. I know the top and the bottom ones should be the same, but that center one is different. I solved this problem by removing the hinge strips and adding a slightly smaller strip of black to the back of each one. This will cover the ink, and it will also make these strips fit a little more snugly into their places, which is a good thing. I cut the numbers 4 times, once from my ink blended strip and 3 times from black cardstock, and I used liquid glue to stack them up. I love the sturdy dimensional feel this gives to the numbers. Oh yes, I've added a black layer to the back of the ink blended circle, and now I'm just wondering if that dotty die cut circle should also be black. I'm not very good at visualizing these things, so I just cut one in black, and whichever one I don't use, I'll keep for another project. And I do think I like the black one better for this one. There's so much white space on this card that this adds a good amount of contrast and drama, I think. I used liquid glue to glue the numbers onto the die cut, and then I used my tape runner just on half of the circle panel to adhere it to the left gatefold panel on the front of the card. Okay, so now for a sentiment. I love the fun font in this sentiment set from Simon Says Stamp, and fortunately it has matching dies because I can't just stamp it across any of these panels since they move. I stamped the happy birthday as well as the love you using my Misty and my Eclipse black ink. This ink is super dark and crisp and easy to clean off my stamp, so I love it, but I'm not sure you can find it these days. I die cut the sentiments with the dies and then used temporary adhesive to test out the birthday sentiment. If I glue it down only on the right side, all the movement still moves without anything tearing or falling off, so that must be the right place for it. Then the love you can go on the inside. I started with it on the dotty side and then I moved it over to the black box, but stay tuned because there's more to come in this area. To make the birthday die cut a little more sturdy, I cut another one just from white cardstock, no stamping, and I drew a line down the back of the stamped one, and then I cut the blank one in the same place, so it's only doubling up on the overhanging portion. I hope that makes sense. I'm feeling like these inside panels of the gatefold are a little too white, so I cut a strip of cardstock 8.5 by 2 inches, blended ink on them in the same way as I did with the circle and the numbers, along with the spray and the gold splatter, and then I glued them in place. And I still felt like it needed more. I grabbed some layering hearts from Hutson, blended ink on them, and spray and splatter, and I added them up in the top left, again only gluing down the portion that isn't going to be moving. And still I felt like it needed more, especially on the inside. There's lots of space there, so I moved the love you back to the right side, and then instead of measuring the black square, I grabbed 2 of my square nesting dies to figure out which one fit better. Then I cut one from white cardstock and I stamped a little sentiment from Mama Elephant on it, again with the black Eclipse ink. This white square only gave me black borders on 2 sides, and it fits perfectly in there, and it actually acts as a stopper for that strip so it won't slide up and down in the card, but it still allows for all the hinge movement. Wow, you'd think I'd planned that, but I didn't. Okay, so finally, here's how the whole card works. Not too bad for not really having a plan to begin with, Personalized on the outside, birthday message on the inside, and a secret love you message on the very, very inside portion. The cards we see on social media don't always show all the love, sweat, and tears that went into them, do they? I hope you enjoyed seeing how this card came together, and I'm happy to say that other than maybe using heavier cardstock to get a more sturdy card, I don't think I would change a thing. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.